All right. So I'm seeing some faces. I want to welcome everyone to the training tonight. My name is Liz Loomis, and I'm here to talk with you about developing a communications plan, specifically for revenue requests on your voters' ballots. So we're going to have a brief hour training here. I'm happy to stay longer and answer questions or brainstorm ideas with you about your projects. So let's go ahead. Michael, we're good, right? Should we launch?
Yes, let's go ahead. Thanks, Liz.
All right, let's do it. Okay. So I'm supposed to have control of the screen here. There we go. There is a small delay. So I'm in Thompson Falls, Montana, and we don't have broadband here yet, right? So effectively, I'm delivering a presentation through DSL. So thank you for your patience. So here's an outline of, well, there was an outline of what we are covering tonight. Hang on, let me try. Perfect. So the first thing I want to tell you who I am and what I do, and then I want to talk about the economy, right? Because certainly right now for taxpayers, the economy is a huge issue. Before we can talk about developing a communications plan, we have to have messages that we're going to say to taxpayers and voters. So I'm going to briefly talk about that. We also have to assess whether or not your project is feasible. It's very important at the point you choose to go to ballot that you request a reasonable amount and are very specific in what your ask may be. And then once we have those things decided, we develop a communications plan. And then after we go through all of that, we'll have kind of a Q&A session. So, you know, advice is free, so take that for what you will. But if you're thinking of asking for a tax increase, you have my undivided attention and free advice for as long as you want to stay on this call. All right, so let's go ahead. There we go. Oop, nope, that wasn't right. I'm hitting that again. So the next slide, I know what that is. It's who I am and what I do. So I've spent 30 years communicating with taxpayers and voters. I've been an elected official, sad to say. I've also worked with many of them. And I've worked at the local, state, and federal levels. And one thing I chose to do in my career was focus on local governments. And the reason for that is that's where taxpayers see the rubber hit the road. So at the point you're able to build a new fire station or hire additional firefighters to reduce response times, that's where I feel personally that tax dollars have the biggest input or impact, excuse me. And so that's where I've chosen to focus my career. So my company works in 4 states in the Northwest: Montana, Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. About 75% of the work we do is helping local governments pass tax increases. We also have a 96% win record for elections. And it's important I say that because we interview our clients as much as they interview us. So if someone comes to me with a proposal that we don't think is viable, we don't take that contract. When you win, we win. And that's part of the reason that we are successful in what we do, is that we help our clients tailor an ask that is reflective of their residents and their income levels. So in addition to ballot measures, we do public relations, general communications, and then we also do crisis communications. And at this point in my life, I have learned that nothing good comes at the end of a phone call after about 10 o'clock at night, right? All right, let's jump in here. Boop. Michael, I can't tell if you're doing this or I'm doing this. Ah, great. Okay, so I think the first thing we want to talk about is the economy, right? So depending on who you speak with, we're looking at double-digit inflation increases, right? So you have some people saying it's 8%. My partner personally, who is a devout conservative / libertarian, says it's closer to 18%. But we have to be sensitive to that fact. And despite the fact that inflation is so high, there still are voters who will approve your revenue request, but it depends on how you phrase it to them and the case you make for it. So hopefully tonight you'll see some examples of how you can do that. The electorate, I don't have to tell anyone on here, super polarized, more so than ever in the history of this country. You have people who absolutely hate the other side. And personally, I think that's tragic. Professionally, I am happy to report that things like fire emergency services, they are nonpartisan. And so what excites me in that regard is that even though our country is polarized, we can certainly unify behind trying to save lives and property. And so I want to applaud folks on this call for that. Taxpayers are also naturally cautious when it comes to spending. They think that you jack their taxes up every year by huge amounts. And very few of them actually understand how much they pay, right? So it's very important you know that. Educating your residents about how fire and EMS is funded is critical for your future success through a ballot measure. So I have that last bullet point. We need to prove ourselves to people, right? And you would think actually that with fire and EMS, it would be a done deal, but it's not. So we certainly have worked on projects that have failed. A lot of it has to do with how our clients communicate with people before they're on the ballot. Okay. Any questions so far? Like I'm saying, it would be so nice to see some faces. So if you want to turn your camera on, I would love that. All right, so Michael, I cannot click this for some reason. Thank you, madam. Okay. I feel like we. Okay, lay of the land. All right, so next one. So the next slide is about planning for a tax increase request. At a minimum, we tell our clients 12 months, right? You need to start setting the stage for your additional revenue request. So 16 months is ideal for a company like mine to come in and help educate the public about what you are requesting. But a year, maybe 8 months, if you're looking at some kind of renewal for a tax increase, but really a year is ideal. And there are 5 steps that you want to go through before you decide to be on ballot. It's very important for voters to know that you have a plan and that you've done your homework. So for many of our clients, that's a strategic plan, a capital facilities plan, and it doesn't have to be some huge multiple thousands of dollars, hire a consultant to come in. I've had clients that have given me CFPs on the back of cocktail napkins, right? So hopefully you'll get a chuckle out of that. But you have to sit down and think about what you need and how much it's going to cost. The second is obviously determining your election timing, your taxing option, bond or general operating levy increase, and the amount. And again, the amount is about 60–70% of what will ensure that you're successful. The third component is assessing your project. Going through your assets and liabilities list that we will do here in a second, and determining whether or not survey research is appropriate for your project. The fourth is developing key messages. So we can't talk about developing a communications plan unless we know what we are going to say. And so I'm going to walk you through some examples. Hopefully you can use those in your own fire departments or fire districts. And then the fifth component I want to stress, it's really important to maintain communication with voters/taxpayers after you're not on ballot or before you go to ballot. Oftentimes, we work with clients for 12 months and our contract ends, and then they think, okay, we succeeded and got this money, and now there's no kind of follow-up for how the money is raised and spent. And voters get very grumpy about that. So even if you're not planning to go to ballot, it's critical that you start educating voters about how emergency services are funded. All right, let me see here. Great. So let's talk about project assessment. Nope. Let's talk about project assessment. Please bear with me. Technology is hard. Okay. So I think the first thing to ask is our project feasible right now? And please keep in mind, even though we're in a difficult economy, your project could still merit voter approval. So we have to go through kind of a pros and cons list about whether or not we want to go to ballot at this time. It's also important to make that assessment a public process. So invite your board members, your union members, your volunteers to come and participate and share their opinions. Invite citizens. I always say to my clients, if you have someone who is an active critic of your fire district or fire department, make sure they have a seat at the table, because that will certainly educate them about what your needs are. And why your ballot measure is necessary. So assets and liability, right? You do the pros and cons, which we will do here. And if your assets outweigh your liabilities, obviously it's a great time to go to ballot. So here are some examples of assets that your fire district or department may have. Again, having an updated plan, right? Some clients call it a strategic plan, some call it a capital facilities plan, standards of cover. But it's very important, again, to show folks that you've done your homework before you're asking them for more money. Another agency asset may be a printed newsletter, right? Maybe you have an e-newsletter. But the fact that you're already communicating with people is something that definitely should go into your asset column. Communicating with the news media. And we're going to talk about this under developing a communications plan. But the news media can truly be a partner for you, for us, in making sure residents understand your revenue needs. An updated website ladies and gentlemen, if I had a quarter for every client that had an outdated website, I wouldn't be here tonight talking with you, right? So updating your website and making sure that's an asset. It's kind of like the Encyclopedia Britannica of our times. Websites are static reference sources. And so we want to make sure all the content on there is up to date and relevant for people who look for more information. A social media presence, critical. Nowadays, I'm preaching to the choir here, but I have had clients approach us who don't have something like a Facebook page, right? Or they have a Facebook page, but they don't use it. And then they have Twitter and Instagram, and they don't use that either. The Pew Charitable Foundation said that 82% of people receive their news information through their social media feeds. So that's how people are learning about you. And so if you are not on some kind of social media platform, you're missing a great opportunity. Regular public outreach, that could be another asset. And that, of course, means the chief or your board of directors goes out and talks to HOAs or water districts or Grange halls, that kind of thing. But that person-to-person contact is very important. And now that COVID is done, well, kind of done, hopefully done, there are more opportunities for that. It's also important to have a good working relationship between management and labor and volunteers. That is critical, and we'll talk about why under the next slide. New chiefs. Do I have any new chiefs on this call? How many people? Anyone want to raise their hand? I'm not seeing any hands raised. But new chiefs, if you are on this call, that's also a wonderful asset for any fire district or department, because new chiefs have good graces, right? So you've got 3 to 6 months of people thinking new beginnings, fresh start. You can put forward new agendas such as revenue increases. So that also could be considered an asset for your department. All right, next slide. Got it. Oop. All right, so let's talk about some common liabilities that we encounter. So in our business, we have a 3 strikes, you're out policy. So, and by saying you're out, that means our ballot measure is in jeopardy, okay? And so here are some examples of what could be considered a strike. So no focus message, right? I have a lot of clients that go out there with community risk reduction messages, or a quick update from the chief, but it's only one update over the course of 12 months. It's critical that you have messages that you are working to educate your residents about, and we'll talk about that a little later. I also have had some boards who have disagreed about the amount of funding that's needed and what that money will be used for. So until your board is in lockstep with each other, you may reconsider wanting to go to ballot. Hostile news media, oh my goodness gracious. So at the point you have a local paper who is angry at you for things that happened 20 years ago, it's important to mitigate that before you're actually on the ballot. Multiple election losses. We have a client right now in Idaho who has lost 3 times, right? And so it was necessary for us to go out and survey the public and find out why they wouldn't support an operating levy increase for more firefighters. So at the point you're also looking at multiple election losses, it's important to determine why people aren't supporting you. Too little time before election. I have local governments contact us and say, hey, we have 3 months until the general election, right? That's going on right now. And we want you to run this project for us. And we're like, no. If you don't take time to educate people and bring them along, explain your challenges to service, why you're deserving of a tax increase, you can't expect them to support that. Now, there are some who do and are successful, but they are really the exception to the rule. Branding issues, that may be another component or liability, and that certainly happens when multiple fire districts butt up against each other and people don't have loyalty to the district that's actually serving them. So that could be an issue. Organized opposition, that's a problem. So for example, we have one client on the Washington ballot in August. That's the primary election in Washington. And this client actually had 2 people contact the fire chief and say they wanted to be part of the con committee. In Washington state, you get pro committees and con committees to write statements for the voter pamphlet. And so, we put this chief and his fire district on notice that that's a concern, right? That certainly is 1 out of 3 strikes. I still think they'll be successful, but it's a concern. Outstanding public relations issues. Probably 5 to 7 years ago, we had a fire district that was dealing with an embezzlement issue. And that embezzlement issue happened 7 years ago. 7 years prior to when we were on ballot. But the fire district hadn't done anything to mitigate and put that issue to rest. So they hadn't responded, they circled the wagons, right? So their thought was saying nothing is the best recourse, and that wasn't the case. So we had to manage that before we went to ballot. All right, next slide. Where are we? There we go. Okay, so I want to talk about survey research. No, messages. I apologize, folks. Technology is hard. Let's see if we go back to survey research. There we go. So if you have a question about how much to ask for and what the money should be used for, you may consider survey research. Now, that's not something we do. My firm is Strategic Communications, but survey research can really drill down into the issues that the public may have with your agency. So if you've had multiple election losses, like our client in Idaho, we went out and did a survey to find out what was going on, right? Why did people fail this operating levy increase 3 times? And what we found out was the fact that they were asking for too much money. So then we stripped down the project and figured, how can we still accomplish hiring additional firefighters and building another fire station that would be palatable for the people paying the bills? And we did that through survey research. And so the end result is a bond, right, which strings out the payments over multiple years. Even though you pay more in interest, it's still more palatable for people annually in what they're having to pay. And survey research also is cost effective for your budgeting. A lot of local governments are spread so thin that they cut their communications budget before they'll cut programs and services, right? And so that's actually a mistake. And survey research can show you the most cost-effective way that people want to receive information from you. Some may like radio, others may like cable TV. Some people want to read about you in their local newspaper, and most people want to see you on social media or your website. So certainly a survey can tell you about that. Now, the one thing I would say about survey research, please make sure that you get a statistically valid sample. So just sending out 4 pages in the mail to everyone who lives in your fire district is not going to guarantee that. You may have a grandchild of a home that's staying with their grandparents who fills the survey out for extra credit in their civics class. It's really important that when you ask people their opinion, that you know who's responding to that survey. And you want to make sure too that the folks responding to the survey are representative of the people that you serve. So maybe you serve more men than women or more women than men. So as the results start coming in, you have to make sure those are weighted for the demographics of who you represent. Okay. How are we doing so far? Good. John, thank you for having your camera on. Can you give me a thumbs up, John Baker? Thank you. All right, let's go to the next. Oops, no. Come on, there we go. All right, so before we get into talking about developing a communications plan, you have to know what you're gonna say. And that's why key messages are so integral to any communications plan that you may develop. So developing key messages means everyone in your agency is on the same page as to what they're saying to residents or voters. It calms the noise. So if you have people coming at you about higher taxes, your key messages are going to reflect the benefits of any kind of revenue increase. So you effectively have a response to any argument that people may make. And so that's why it's important. So I'm going to just push you through this and give you some examples of key messages that you can use for any projects that you're doing. All right. Oop, great. Okay, so your key messages, usually for our clients, we develop 3 to 5 messages, and this is what they contain. The first is who you are and what you do. You cannot assume that people know who provides them with fire and emergency medical service, right? So it's important you describe who you are and the services that you provide, even if it's a reminder. And this becomes a boilerplate message for everything that you may send out. And I'll show you an example of that in a second. The second key message, especially for government, has to be why you are deserving of their tax dollars. Okay. What have you done? Do you have clean audits? Are you applying for grants to stretch tax dollars further? Do you rely on volunteers? I mean, all of these are reasons why people think you could be deserving of additional revenue. The third component of key messages is challenges to service. Are you seeing call volumes increase? Are you seeing response times increase? Are you working with a piece of apparatus that you can't replace, right? It's important people understand specifically the challenges that you're facing to service. And I'll be honest with you, I have a lot of clients in local government who don't want to share this information. And I tell them every time, if you are struggling, you have an obligation to tell people that. And if you don't tell them that, then why would they give you more money? And just because response times are increasing, I have one client right now on the ballot who is spending close to $1 million a year in overtime. And now they actually have union firefighters saying they don't want overtime anymore. These guys are so tired, right? And so I said to my fire chief, I said, we need to share that information. And he was hesitant to share it. And the career firefighters were hesitant to share it as well, right? But it was because we shared it that all of a sudden people started saying, holy cow, we didn't know this. And, at the point we're spending almost $1 million a year in overtime, why aren't we hiring 5 new firefighters for that? Right. And I think it's fair to say that at the point career firefighters want you to hire more firefighters so they don't get more overtime pay. That's kind of a sign that they want the help. So that's good. So the fourth message has to be the solution, right? And the solution is not just the tax increase. What it is the benefit to taxpayers. So if you're asking for a revenue request for 3 more firefighters, for example, that's what you focus on. And certainly you have to explain the financial conditions associated with that. But the focus is on the benefits people will see. So the fifth one, the fifth message I also get pushback from clients on is the contingency plan. So at the point that you are on the ballot and voters don't support a revenue increase request, there have to be consequences. You cannot, for example, you cannot find a way to fund or finance a new fire engine if people aren't willing to pay for it. Because at the point you're starting to find revenue to do things that you've asked people for a revenue request for, then you lack credibility. So there has to be consequences to how people vote. And this is not a threat. We do not threaten voters. The point is, if you don't have the money to make your needed service improvements or even maintain service levels, and then all of a sudden you find the money, right? Then that really causes a lack of credibility for us. So, all right, I want to check in with folks so far. How are we doing? Can I see some thumbs up? Anything? Chuck Smith, can't see your handsome face. Where are you? Josh Waldo. I recognize that face. Didn't we serve on the conference committee together? Thank you, Chuck. And Chinook Fire. I'll look at these gentlemen. All thumbs up. Great. Okay, wonderful. Carrie Phillips. Oh my goodness, look at all of you. That's great. Okay. All right. So I want to cruise through these examples of key messages. And of course, my presentation is available for everyone on here. So here's an example of who we are and what we do. So this is a client of ours, right? And this is a key message we created for them. And you can duplicate this. So to me, copying is the highest form of flattery. So for your boilerplate information, who are you? How many people do you serve? What services do you provide? What makes your agency unique? I have an all volunteer client that staffs with all volunteers in rural Eastern Washington. And what makes them unique are 3 generations of volunteer firefighters who have all served the community, right? So if you're an all volunteer agency, that's something that you're going to want to share with folks, right? So this is just one example of your first key message. So let's go to the second one. Where's that? There we are. Okay, example number 2. Remember, we talked about why are you deserving of a tax increase? Why are you deserving of support from your community and its residents slash taxpayers? This is another client of ours, right? Operating under a balanced budget, even if by law we are required to do that, our taxpayers don't know that, right? They think you run deficits and you spend, spend, spend. So simply reminding them of something that is a fact is very important. Being audited, if you have third person audits or state audits, letting them know that you have passed those is also very important. And I mentioned before grants, right? I know a lot of fire districts and departments in Montana apply for and receive state and federal grants. So it's important that folks know you're trying to stretch tax dollars further, but it's also important that they know that grant funding is no substitute for taxes. Okay. All right. Let's see why we are deserving. We talked about challenges to service. So getting specific about the issues that you're facing are critical. So for this client, they've experienced a 62.5% call volume increase since 2012, right? So look at your statistics, look at your call volume increases, and pick the number that's going to have the most compelling response. All right, that's part of this strategic communications. And then they're talking about population increase, right? I know for a fact Montana is growing leaps and bounds. Guess why? I moved here. I'm retiring here to Montana, right? And so you have to be able to share with folks what kind of population growth that you're facing. I also know the community I moved to is aging. So the average age for Thompson Falls, where I live, is 63 years old, right? And we all know the older we get, the more we rely on emergency services. So all of these kinds of facts are super important to share with your voters. All right. So that gives you examples of 3 different messages, your first 3 messages that you can create for your fire district. So hopefully that's helpful. Now let's talk about the meat, right? So we have our key messages. We've talked about that. We've assessed our project to determine whether or not it's feasible. And so the next step is taking our messages and putting them into a communications plan. Now, there are 5 components to an effective communications plan. The first is paid communications, and that's something that your fire district or department would fund. So, for example, a newsletter printed and mailed to all households or all registered voters. The second component is earned media, and that encapsulates your relationship with your local news media reporters and editors. The third is owned media. Those are assets that your fire district owns, like your website, signage. If you have like a reader board sign or electronic signage, social media, I think I've hit on that. 82%, folks, 82% get their news from their social media platforms or applications. And the final one is public outreach. And again, that's when I have my board members and my fire chiefs go out and press the flesh. We also have a funny saying in politics. It's called the rubber chicken dinner circuit. Right? So most of you probably know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to delve into each of these sections a little more in detail. I do realize that many fire districts have limited budgets when it comes to communicating. And so I want to pull out some of the most effective and more importantly, cost-effective ways that you can make an impression on the people you serve.
What are those outbuildings? You're saying in an outbuilding. This looks like my daddy's outbuilding.
Josh Waldo, we want you to mute. I love Zoom. Zoom is awesome. Okay, let's go ahead and scroll through. So paid communications. So paid communications, again, are things the fire district pays to produce. It's usually printed and mailed pieces. And different states have different requirements. So make sure in Montana, you know what the requirements are. For example, Washington is you have to mail to all households, and Oregon is you only have to mail to registered voters, right? And Idaho is even more different. You can just simply mail to people you want to mail to as many times as possible. So understand what that is. The most cost-effective thing, depending on your size, at about 100,000 residents, a newsletter may not be economic. But if you serve less than 100,000, a newsletter printed and mailed is going to be one of the most cost-effective ways you can communicate your priorities to voters, okay? And make sure when you do a newsletter that it's not 4 pages or 20 pages. You know, I have a lot of clients who want to do annual reports that are like 10 pages. No one's going to read that. You want 2 pages, front and back. So it's effectively 1 piece of paper, right? That's enough for 3 articles and graphics. And right in there, those are 3 articles about your key messages, right? And if it is too expensive for your fire district to print and mail a newsletter to all households, there are ways you can get creative. I have clients who print a newsletter and blow it into a local paper, and they pay a lot less, and the local newspaper gets a little money, which always is really nice, right? That can translate to a positive review at the point you're on the ballot. But there are ways to get around it. I have another client. We do quarterly columns in 2 local newspapers. It's a lot less expensive than printing and mailing a newsletter to all households. So that's another option. Some clients like to do an e-newsletter. I'm kind of hesitant about that with email. A printed and mailed newsletter actually gets more penetration than doing an e-newsletter. Now, if you want to do an e-newsletter and put it on your Facebook page, guess what, folks? That's going to be very effective. Okay, so that gives you a couple of examples. Next slide. There we go.
Hello there.
Oop.
Fire Chief Randy Fair here. Your time is valuable, so stick with me for 90 seconds
I want to stop him.
to learn more
Okay.
about how our fire levy lid lift will improve safety for everyone in
No, Fire Chief. Hush.
Enumclaw.
Nope.
We're struggling to meet emergency service
hitting
demands of our community. While many associate us with fighting
Michael,
fires,
are you?
the truth is that 74% of the calls received
Crikey.
last year were for emergency
Michael, I
medical
think we
service.
both might be hitting that. So
I'm
you
not
hit it.
actually. I'm trying
Oh.
to. I wasn't hitting anything. There. Looks like it
Okay.
stopped.
All
Okay,
right,
sorry.
That's okay. I'm so sorry, folks. Again, Thompson Falls, Montana, DSL. What can I say? So another that is growing in importance by way of communicating with residents are videos, right? And again, these videos are shared through your website or social media, but you have to keep in mind the attention span of most people. And thanks to things like video games, social media, online news, The attention span is 1 to 2 minutes maximum. So I have a couple of examples here. Timing wise, I'll play one of them. But we do 60-second spots for clients, right? And it's usually our fire chief who is the narrator of a video about who they are and what they do, how they're funded and why they're deserving, and what challenges to service do they have. So we effectively take our 5 key messages and boil them down into 60, 120-second spots. And then we promote the heck out of those videos with our fire chiefs, right? And funny is good. I have one fire chief in Clark County Fire District 3 in Washington. His name is Scott Sorensen. And when he delivers a video message, he sounds like a computer. And we were concerned about that at first, that he wasn't really great for delivering the message that we needed about the tax increase. But he was so funny in how he delivered the message that video went viral, right? So funny is good. If you can rope something in there for humor, I think that's going to be well received by your audience. So let's just go ahead and look. We'll go to the next slide and I'll show you Chief Fair's.
Those included heart attacks, strokes,
video.
and injuries of all types.
Share what we've accomplished over the last
Currently,
year.
Let me
hello
see if
there.
we can go
Fire
over.
Chief Randy Fair here.
Okay.
Your time is valuable, so stick with me for 90 seconds to learn more about how our fire levy lid lift will improve safety for everyone in Enumclaw. We're struggling to meet emergency service demand.
Okay, so I'm pausing that for a second, right? So Chief Fair is an amazing human being, and he's a big goofball. And he's born and raised in this community that he has served his entire, he started as a volunteer, then he was a career firefighter, and now he's fire chief of the same fire department where in the community where he grew up. And this 90-second, right? You're telling folks how long they have to listen to it. This 90-second video to encourage people to support a tax increase. Again, we've had over 12,000 views. So I just want you to see briefly some of the content. And again, all of this information can be sent to you.
Of our community. While many associate us with fighting fires, the truth is that 74% of the calls received last year were for emergency medical service. Those included heart attacks, strokes, and injuries of all types. Currently, we lack enough firefighters to cover our community's needs, so our staff works overtime to fill shifts, an expensive, unsustainable, and unsafe model for both them and for you. With the levy lid lift, we can hire 3 additional firefighters with EMT certification and ensure we have a medical aid unit and a fire engine in service 24 hours a day. The fact is, increased staffing means that we can get to your emergency faster and make it more likely you are still here to enjoy what matters. For more information about the Fire Levy Lid Lift, visit our website at enumclawfire.org or give me a call at 36.
Okay, so one thing I want to point out about why I love doing these trainings and conference presentations, everything that public agencies create, everything that local governments create are considered public documents. So you could literally go to Enumclaw Fire Department's website, download this video, put your own fire chief in it, and use a similar script. Do you find that helpful? Let me see some thumbs up, because right now all I'm seeing are names and mute buttons. Ah, thank you, Chuck. Awesome, Jared. Thank you. Right? So use this content, right? I say this all the time. You don't have to hire a consultant like me. There's so many resources out there to help you win. And yes, Bruce Suenram, you have a question. Your hand's up, sir. Or are you just giving me a high five? Oh, I think he's giving me a high five. Bruce, do you want to say something? No, okay. But what I'm saying is this is what's so wonderful, right? Because as public agencies, we want to share resources. We want all of our brothers and sisters in the fire and EMS business to succeed. And there are so many who have come before us who have been successful for different reasons. So again, if you happen to talk to Chief Randy Fair, you say hello to him from Liz Loomis in Thompson Falls, Montana. So they will be on the ballot August 2nd in Washington State for a fire levy lid lift that will bring in an additional $700,000 for this fire district. It's a combined district with volunteers and career staff. Okay, so let's keep going. I'm not going to play you Fire District 3 in Clark County, although I encourage you just to watch Chief Sorensen because he is so wooden in how he talks. He has a cult following that's quite phenomenal. Okay, so we're going past that, considering the time. Okay, so earned media. The news media can be your best friend or your worst enemy. At the point they like you, they are critical in helping to educate the public about what it is you need folks to know. So doing regular news releases, letters to the editor, being a guest opinion editorial writer, all of that is super important. It's also very cost effective, right? So basically writing a news release costs staff time. That's it. You're not printing and mailing anything. You're simply engaging the public through this third party. It also provides you with credibility, right? So at the point the news media reports on something that you've shared with them, it's not just you telling people, hey, we're wonderful, right? It's the newspaper saying, hey, you know, they got a grant. Hey, they built a new station or they hired 3 more firefighters. So things like that are important. And that's another thing about your communications plan. You can't just do one. You have to do multiple things, right? And that's why we're talking about 5 different components of an effective communications plan. Okay, so that's our earned media. When you do earned media, the most effective thing you can do to broaden your scope and educate the public is a news release. And I encourage my clients to do 1 to 2 per month. I encourage them to communicate strategically, not just incident reporting. A lot of my clients have PIOs and they go out the who, what, when, where, and how about a fire or an MVA or an EMS call. But it's important that you talk to the public through the news media about your financing challenges, for example. Talk to them about challenges to service, talk to them about revenue requests. Don't just talk to them about fire and bleeding things, okay? I also like editorial board visits. I feel it's critical that my clients have good relationships with reporters and editors. And usually it's my fire chief that fills that role, or it could be a board chairperson. And, you know, sometimes I have fire chiefs who are more introverted. And in those situations, we have a volunteer firefighter or a career firefighter go out and talk to the news media and build those relationships. And that's fine too, okay? Right, owned in social media. I'm gonna keep beating all of you over the head with this. Owned media, of course, your website, very important. Any kind of signage you may have, that's also important, even if it's a letter changeable reader board. You know, at the point you have some message on there, that's going to penetrate the minds of everyone who drives by that. So I encourage you to use that. I can tell you for social media, I've listed the top social media applications. If you're on Facebook, it's just as easy for you to be on Instagram and Twitter. Nextdoor is more of a challenge. They have a much more rigorous process to get approved. But YouTube, you can have your own YouTube channel where you post these videos, right? So these are all options that are available to you. So I want to talk briefly about social media. So these photos on the left are my friends, okay? And they were taken in the past 2 years. So I went out to dinner with my friends Jason and Linda, top left, and literally at dinner, they're on their phones. They're on Facebook. They're on Instagram, okay? And then for my birthday last year, I went with 2 people who work with me in this wonderful business, and we went to have pedicures, right? Mani-pedis, ladies and gentlemen. And guess what? They were on their phones. They were on social media. So at the point that you don't have a social media account for your agency, or you just don't want to deal with social media because it is a time suck. All of us will admit that, right? But I cannot stress enough how important it is to have a presence here. And so if you don't want to do it, then find someone within your organization who will do it for you. Okay? Okay. So again, we talked about Facebook. At the minimum, I ask that you get on Facebook 2 to 3 times a week, do some kind of post, some kind of interactive post of firefighters fighting fire, firefighters training, and they are not lengthy posts. At the point you have something more comprehensive to share, like your budget, for example, you want to drive people to your website for that. And now look left on this slide and let's talk about your website. This picture that you see of this happy, dirty firefighter is phenomenal. You don't want photos of everything exploding, burning, and bleeding, right? Because that scares people. You want residents to see firefighters training and happy and laughing, pushing in a new fire engine, cutting a ribbon for a new fire station, participating in parades, giving out candy canes or, you know, junior firefighter hats, right? Showing that kind of community connection is much more important than a bunch of firefighters standing around smiling during a burning exercise with a house on fire behind them, okay? You can still have your burn, bleed photos like in a photo gallery, right? But just, you don't want to lead with that. You want something that's going to make people feel warm and fuzzy and give you more money, right? Okay. I did want to put this post here about social media being super important. This was a 4th of July message we wrote for a fire chief many years ago, just about fireworks and, you know, please don't set off fireworks, go to an organized presentation of them. And we hit 250,000 people. And this fire district is only 55,000 residents. So shows you how deep the reach of social media is. Okay, the last part is public outreach. This is what I find my clients like least because it takes the most part of their time. Developing a brief PowerPoint that contains your key messages, who you are, what you do, why you're deserving, challenges to service, and your proposed solution and consequences if the solution doesn't pass. A PowerPoint presentation that is developed, something super brief, about 15 minutes, and taking that out on the road, right? So if you have Rotary, Kiwanis, Lions, church groups, HOAs, water associations, irrigation districts, granges, getting in front of people and doing that person-to-person contact, nothing replaces that. Nothing, right? So we strongly recommend to our clients that they do things like open houses, public meetings. But at the point you're doing an open house, communicate strategically, right? It's not just, hey, come in and do a station tour and walk all over our apparatus with your 5 and 7-year-old child, right? What brochures do you have there to educate people about who you are, how you're funded, why you're deserving, right? And I tell my clients too, we always educate for the next revenue request, always, even on years we're not on the ballot, okay? One last example, and I know I'm 1 minute over right now, but we're almost done. We have worked for a rural fire district in Eastern Washington for 13 years, and we have never failed a levy increase request, bond, lid lift, permanent levy request. And the reason being is the years that we are not on ballot, we are educating the community about how we are funded and why operating levy increases are required and how many stations we're planning for in the future. So at the point we are on ballot, folks have been hearing about that for almost 12 months ahead of time, and there's no surprises, right? So please, please do not underestimate the importance of public outreach. Okay. Oop. Right. So again, we talked about it, PowerPoint, community groups, the importance of that, right? I also have in here leave behind materials. Again, you want materials that reflect your key messages, like an FAQ card, who you are, how you're funded, why you're deserving, challenges to service. Am I sounding like a broken record, Jared? I like your flag, Jared. Do you see my bacon flag? That's my bacon flag. I love bacon, folks. Oh, can't get enough of bacon. All right. So once you have your communication plan, right, with paid communications, earned media, owned and social media, and public outreach, this is what it might look like. And again, copy this, right? That is the highest form of flattery, as far as I'm concerned. But you can see this client was going for a bond of 34 cents per thousand to build stations, bunch of stations, replace all of their stations, actually. And this shows you how we determine the plan, right? We put in key election dates, and then we identify everything that we are going to be educating the public on over the course of these months, right? Let's see here. Okay. So that's the conclusion. And yep. And so I want to take questions right now. I have no other commitments. If folks want to brainstorm on their ballot measures, I would welcome that. Michael, I don't know. It sounds like Sealy Lake. No, Sealy Lake is not a client of ours. But so if you have questions, if you want to talk about a proposed ballot measure you're thinking of doing, Michael, I assume we have some more time.
Yeah, you're welcome to stay as long as people would like to stay. So yeah.
Great. And if you don't, if you want to go and cook dinner for your wife, we're certainly going to support that too. I wish someone would cook me dinner. But I'm super happy to take questions, or if you have other questions, you can email Michael and she can get a hold of me, but the stage is yours.
So how's the fishing in Thompson Falls?
Oh, Bruce, let me tell you, that's part of the reason that I want to retire here. I love fly fishing. I caught 3 browns. So I'm right on the Thompson River, and I caught 3 browns yesterday, and they weren't huge, but oh my goodness, they were good. Because I can
Good.
keep those, right? Yeah.
We met in Boise last March, I think.
Oh, thank you. Okay, well, I appreciate you reminding me of that. Yeah, Idaho is, Idaho, Montana is climate wise for tax increases a lot more reasonable than Idaho, just so you know. Who else? John, Jared, and my Chinook fire guys. We actually have 2 of you there. That's kind of cool.
So you say 2 to 3 times a week for social media, but how do you know when it becomes too much? Like,
if you post too much to social media, your likes and your shares will go down, right?
Yep.
And so that's how you determine if you're posting too much. 2 to 3 is kind of the minimum that I recommend for clients. And when you post, Jared, you want to make sure those posts are strategic, right? You don't want a bunch of firefighters burning stuff down, right? Say, for example, you're doing a budget meeting or something like that, right? Your post has to be strategic, focused on that second message of yours about why you're deserving. So we're considering our budget. You are this fire district, right? We represent you and we want you at this meeting. And even if no one shows up, they want to be asked. Does that make sense?
yeah, so I've been using ours kind of for more just trying to grow it so far. I've been doing Chief for about 1.5 years, so I'm trying to grow everything right now before I go to ask for stuff. And so I'm just kind of, so I maybe do like 1 every week, maybe every other week. During the summer, it's probably every week, like big calls if we're out doing stuff, like the weather turns bad, like informational stuff. So I'm at like 1 maybe a week, every other week, every 10 days, somewhere in there. And
you need more.
But I see that if I do it more, like you said, my likes go down. If I do the bigger stuff, I'm seeing like the Kalispell new and used groups and those pick it up, and then it gets blown way up. And I get in a town of 800, I'm getting 25,000 views and likes and stuff. So
good for you. So here's one thing to think about doing, right? So at the point you are posting big calls or accidents or fires, right? Tie that into what you may need in the future. So for example, our fire district responded to 123 Main Street. We had all these responding agencies. And Chief, I don't know your situation, but you report on that. And then you say something along the lines of, if we had 3 more full-time firefighters, right, we wouldn't have to rely so much on mutual aid. Or if we had, I don't know, a ladder truck, right? If we had our own ladder truck, then we could have gotten to this scene further. We are going to talk to our community about the need for this piece of apparatus. Do you see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
you can, and people like stuff on fire. People want to know about accidents, closed roads and things like that. But at the point you can position yourself strategically for a revenue request you may have, it's going to help you exponentially get a yes vote.
Okay. Like I say, I haven't even touched the surface of trying to like reach out for money or anything yet. Like
What do you
A
need?
town-
What are you thinking of?
so I really would like I'm one of our trucks is like an 87 old Cal fire truck that's type 3's engine. So it's very old. It needs replaced. And so I mean you're looking at $300,000 to $400,000 in a town of 800 people and a budget of 67,000 to 70,000 a year.
Mhm.
So
Do you, okay, so this would certain, and you're thinking 300,000 to 400,000. I would think a type 3 would be closer to 500,000 right now. Am I wrong?
for a brand new one, yeah, but for
You can buy a used one. Okay.
yeah,
Mhm,
if I can find like a 4 or 5 year old
mhm.
truck that I can,
Okay,
you know.
and so, if, so for a community of your size, if I was going to try to fund that one piece of apparatus, what I would say is, this truck costs X, right?
Yep.
And so we are going to ask voters for a tax increase of Y. And then we are saving this money, right? Like it's almost like creating apparatus replacement account, right?
Yep.
So you say, we're asking you for this tax increase, and here's the kicker for your people, because we want to pay cash instead of financing it, which is going to cost taxpayers more, right? And at the point you're asking the small population for a reasonable increase, and you're explaining to them, why it's needed and how it's going to cost them less and serve them more, I think you will be successful.
So my other battle that I'm battling is in 2010, one of our board members embezzled about $170,000 and had to reimburse us for $1,501. Is all.
Welcome to my world. Welcome
So-
to my world. Yeah, and
So-
and that was 2000 and what, Chief?
10.
2010. Well, that's 12 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I know in smaller communities, memories run deep, right?
So
So you have safeguards in place now to prevent something like that from happening
Yep.
again,
Yep.
right? And your books, I'm assuming, have been audited by a third party?
So up until this last year, the county had actually taken all of our books and we're doing everything directly through the county. They were actually the board because they abolished the board until they could get the money paid back and
Wow,
basically solvent again. So,
wow. You've had quite a time as chief, huh?
well, I only took over as chief about, like I say, in October of 2000. So I was a captain before that. So, but I've been kind of doing the budget for about the last 6 years, 7 years, and so
Okay.
that's
Mhm.
kind of where I'm just kind of trying to.
That's great. And here's another thing, being on the ballot regularly is important, right? So people understand they have to fund emergency services. I have one client now who approached us to do like a 50 cent per thousand increase in their operations levy. And I was like, no. I was like, well, we haven't been on the ballot in 17 years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a problem, right? So going onto the ballot, chief, and asking for a small increase and being successful and building on that is a great idea. So if you have to fund a gently used type 3 engine, do it, right? Make it
Yep.
reasonable. Show them that you have done that, build on your successes, and you can then move forward with larger asks.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for asking the question. John, I love your hat. You got to say something to me, John Baker. I love camo. I go to Goodwill here in Thompson Falls and I buy all my clothes, used camo clothes. It's awesome.
No, nothing from me tonight.
No? Okay.
No,
Okay.
we were attempting to develop a full-time paid volunteer, and ended up running some surveys and looking into it, and our tax base wasn't big enough to support the amount we needed. So we've kind of given up on that for the time being. But like you said, population's changing. So we'll see how it goes in a few years.
What-
We've got 2 full-time right now,
Okay.
but we're trying to get 24/7.
Okay. So let's kind of brainstorm on this, right? So what are you looking to get 24/7? How much of an increase would that be for folks? And please let me know. I'm assuming you're Chief Baker, right?
No, so I don't have the numbers.
Oh, okay. Well, so what I'm saying is, here's my propane bill, by the way, Thompson Falls, gotta love that. So let's kind of talk about that, right? So you're saying your tax base is too small to support a 24/7 operation.
Six full-time
Oh, well,
firefighters.
okay, yeah. All right, so that's a lot, but could you get them to support 2 more? A
Working
lot,
on it.
yeah. So a lot of what we do for our clients is incremental tax increase requests. And we pitch it as we're only asking for what we need when we need it, right? And we're reducing impacts to taxpayers. So at the point you need 6 full-time firefighters, maybe you go out and you tell people you need 6, but you're only asking for 2, right? And you're going to bring 2 on board and you're going to communicate the success you have with 2 additional full-time personnel. And then you're going to come back in 2 more years and potentially ask for 2 more, right? So you're not, you're being transparent in what you are requesting, but you're letting them know you're only going to do it gradually. And it could just be 1, right? Just 1 firefighter, it's going to cost everyone X cents per thousand of assessed value, right? And you're going to do this gradually and show the community how you're improving service as a result. Something like that?
Works
Because
for me.
2 would be better than none, right?
Always. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're a little bigger than Jared.
That doesn't take
Still-
much.
Yeah, still small.
So this, this is the interesting thing I find. My smaller fire districts need money more than my bigger ones, right? Because they are the communities that are getting hammered with growth, right? You have people like me moving to your community and you're like, ugh, So, but it's something to think about, Michael, too, right? Just doing some kind of, I don't know, training for some smaller fire districts. But so incremental increases, John, I think could be a very effective way to get past what you may need to do. Now, obviously you can't do it all at once, right? But that's why you do 2 this year, right? Allow a couple of years to pass, 2 more. And you've told people it's coming all along. Just an idea.
Yeah, I'll run that past the chief. I want to I told him this was going on tonight. And this is recorded.
Yep.
Right.
And I'm, Michael, provided you agree, I'm super happy to be a resident of Montana, and B, advice is free. You can call me up, buy me a cup of coffee, right? I'm happy to brainstorm with anybody, because ultimately we're in this business to help local government succeed. I believe in local government, right? I said before, that's where the rubber hits the road. You get 2 firefighters, John, that's going to reduce response times, right? People see that, and that makes an impact, as opposed to the, bloody federal government, right? Like, what the heck is going on with our tax dollars there, for God's sake, right? But school districts, fire districts, cities, right? When you fill in a pothole, when you pave a street, when you build a new school or hire more teachers or replace technology or get a new Type 3 engine like, Jared wants to do. All of that has a huge impact on people. And so that's why we do what we do. So feel free. Bye, Chuck. Feel free, right? Just give me a call or talk to Michael if that's okay. No cost, right? Let's get you where you need to be.
Thanks.
Cool. You're welcome.
And
Carrie,
Jared, I got a Type 3 for you if you can get me a Type 1.
Right?
at least no one wants a ladder truck. We're dealing with that
No.
with a client of ours. Holy cow, are those expensive, right? All right, Carrie, I see you're on mute and I can't see your face, but any questions?
No, sorry, I don't have a camera on my computer. I guess I followed a lot of these trainings that the state fire chiefs has put on, and I really enjoyed them. I guess we're Macomb County out in the eastern half of the state, pretty rural, but we are going to be facing, we're going to need to update some apparatus and, turnout gear, and things are aging as is everybody else's too. And so I guess that's why I wanted to tune into this one and get some ideas as to how we can go about funding some of those and what we need to do in the future. We haven't had any levy increases lately, and it's one of those deals where it has been, 17, 18, 20 years, whatever. It's been a long time. So hearing, stuff like the incremental increases and that kind of thing, I think those are some very good pointers that we're going to have to look into and start doing some of that stuff. The social media, we don't really have any kind of presence there. Our community is very supportive of our department and appreciative, and we have a very good turnout, like on our fundraiser, our fireman's ball that we do every year. We have a very good turnout, but that doesn't cover all the bills.
Nope.
So
yeah,
we're gonna have to do some kind of increase sooner or later.
Yeah, so one of the phrases we use at my business is exercise your voters. Exercise your voters. Make sure they equate tax revenue to service, right? So even if you're asking for, I have one client on the ballot who's asking for a 7 cent per 1,000 increase to fund additional staffing. And I think, what is that for the average homeowner? It's something like, I want to say like $7 a month for this particular fire district, something less than that. It's like a super low amount because they haven't been on the ballot for so long, right? So exercise your voters, make sure they understand that you will come before them with reasonable revenue requests, right? Just something to think about.
Yeah, and that makes sense too. It kind of comes full circle. I'm on the school board too here, and we've noticed that as well with the board, the school, and those increases. We are way more likely to pass building reserves and those kind of things if we ask for a little rather than, a
Mhm.
little bit every year, every couple years, rather than
Yep.
a big increase all at once. So
Yep, smart
that
man, but
does make sense.
you are a glutton for punishment, right? At the point you're on a school board and fire district.
And I work for the county road department too. So
Oh my God. You are a real public servant times 3.
you could say that. Yeah.
Wow.
And yes, a glutton for punishment, I guess, but it seems to be working out pretty good.
Yeah.
We're in a pretty good place here. We've got like I said, for the most part, a pretty good community that supports the school and definitely the fire and EMS. So
That's great.
we're
Mhm.
grateful for that.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, seriously, that's why we do what we do, right? Is because we believe in public service. So I just don't like partisan politics anymore, right? I just want to do public service. I don't want to get into any of the partisan stuff. Makes me sad. So
Right. Yes, most definitely.
Yeah.
So thank you for your information. I appreciate it. And I look
you're
forward to
welcome.
talking to you sometime.
Great. Yep.
Thanks, Carrie.
Happy. Michael, thank you so
Thanks.
much. This
Thank
was
you,
great.
Liz. Thank you so much. That's great. Yeah, and we'll have the recording available and we'll send it out to everyone. So we'll share your slides. And yes, thank you so much, Liz. And thank you
Great.
everyone for joining.
Thank
Yep.
you.
All right. Take good care.
Good night.
Bye-bye.